members of the newly constituted task force on the implementation of the Edo State Private Properties Protection Law 2017. I am sure you are all familiar with the background that led to the state government promulgating this all-important law. As you are aware, we had almost found ourselves in an archaic situation as regards to private property ownership in this state, particularly as it relates to land. Even though we were blessed, or are blessed and privileged, to have perhaps the best land tenure system in this part of the continent, given the fact that from pre-colonial times, our land tenure systems were very, very clearly defined. We suddenly found ourselves in a state where there had become so much uncertainty and anarchy in our land tenure system, and it was now beginning to spill over into other properties, where people now took it upon themselves to claim ownership of property that did not or does not rightfully belong to them, and alienate such properties in the manners determined by them. We were suddenly faced with a situation where the society and our communities were streaming into anarchy. And the effects were becoming obvious on the entire polity and our economy. Because the basis for meaningful economic development and economic growth is very clearly defined property rights. If I claim to own an asset or a property, and somebody can just willfully come in and take over that property without recourse to the law, then clearly it dissuades investments or further further desire to want to accumulate property or assets in that community. Secondly, we had begun to notice that the preponderance of the use of violence in our communities. People had constituted themselves into armed gangs or armed militias funded from proceeds from these illegal acts to begin to terrorize and impose their own order on our communities. If such situations were allowed to continue, the outcomes were very clear. We would have degenerated into anarchy. And that's why we will always be grateful to our royal father, Omonoba Nedo Ukwa-Polopolo, Obaiwaye II, during his coronation, raised it as one of the key and cardinal concerns that he wanted to deal with. With my inauguration following up on his coronation, I felt that we had enough political consensus to ensure that this happens. And therefore, one of the first bills that this administration sent to the House of Assembly was this bill to curtail and curb the activities of people, armed gangs who went around in the guise of whatever names to alienate land, property that wasn't theirs, and to deal with those properties in the way they decided to. The bill had certain provisions, and this committee is one of the provisions to give effect to the bill. We understand clearly that a whole economy had evolved based on this unfortunate situation. Lots of young men and women had begun to create a whole livelihood and existence on this mode of life. Haven't come up with a law to stop these activities. Government understands that certain persons will therefore be economically displaced. And therefore, one of the roles of this committee, a body like this, was to, amongst others, give government that sensitivity as to, reaching out to those who are going to be displaced as a result of the promulgation of these activities and how to resettle them. So specifically, the terms of reference for this newly constituted task force are to enforce the provisions of the newly enacted Edo State Private Properties Protection Law 2017. The Secretary to Government is going to make available, in the first instance, 10,000 copies of that law to this committee, and who will help and assist in, as part of his activities, helping us disseminate information relating to this law to the communities most affected, so that people do not claim ignorance of the law. The task force will also help us monitor all community development associations and other groups active within communities in the state to ensure that they comply with the provisions of the law. Government has a register of the community development associations it has registered. Community development associations are bodies made up of members of a particular community to assist and do all that is legal to help both in the economic and social cohesion of those communities with the purpose of assisting their economic and social development. There is nowhere in the license or in the rules governing community development associations that authorizes them to deal on land matters. This task force will also ensure that community development associations, CDAs, and other such groups are prohibited from involvement in the sale of community land or collection of any related fees or levies. Government is also taking other measures, including the compulsory registration of all landed properties in Edo State under our geographical information system. We believe that in the next couple of years, that exercise will be complete, and it will then be illegal for anybody to transfer or deal on land that has not been registered. So ownership of land is very clearly spelled out, and the process and procedure for transferring or alienating such will also be clearly defined. The task force will help to apprehend or direct security agencies to apprehend any persons or group of persons who convene the provisions, any provisions of the law, and hand over such persons to the security authorities. The task force will receive petitions from members of the public in connection with the enforcement of the law and report such findings to government. I am aware that, as we speak, that there's a long list of such petitions that have emanated from various communities, and fortunately some of them have been dealt with by the Palace of the Oba of Benin. Right. And lastly, the task force, as I said, will help to review the activities of members of the community development associations who hitherto were involved in the sale of land and who will now be economically displaced, and suggest, you will suggest to government what they suggest to government areas or ways in which such persons can be rehabilitated and resettled in other activities in the state. And finally, the task force will carry out any other assignment or related activities that any other assignments that are related to the enforcement of this law. It is therefore my singular honor and pleasure to inaugurate the committee on the task force on the Edo State Private Properties Protection Law 2017, made up of the following members: Mr. Solomon Arase as chairman, Chief Usaroida as vice chairman, Ambassador Imohe as a member, Mr. John Ejali, a member, Mr. J.A. Olorunfemi, a member, Mr. Matthew Idio-Yekeme, member, Mr. Andrew Oliha, member, Francisca Uvi Elema, member, Permanent Secretary, Cabinet, Governor's Office, member, and Mrs. John Ikpefa, Principal State Counsel, as a secretary to the task force. Congratulations.
Our role as Implementation Committee being advisory and strategic within the implementation process. Your Excellency, in reassuring you of our firm commitment to your vision in the seamless implementation of this law, I wish to assure citizens that to the extent that they respect the details of this law, they have no reason to fear. However, for those who will choose to test the will of the state, I can assure on behalf of the committee of our strong will to bring the weight of the law to bear on them. Our mandate is to advance the vision of excellency in guaranteeing that Edo State is one where law-abiding citizens are guaranteed peace, security, and protection, while criminally minded individuals are guaranteed justice within the criminal justice system. This we are determined to achieve. In concluding, I once again thank Your Excellency for recognizing and appointing us to drive this vision. We accept this appointment with a great sense of responsibility and with strong determination to excel. I thank Your Excellency and pray that God continues to shower His blessings on our beloved state.